So welcome to Devlog 2, and this week I wanted to sort of talk about the technology and tools that are being used in the game. So here you can see that obviously the code base is kind of C++ with a bunch of blueprints in Unreal Engine. And Unreal Engine makes you want to sort of create things as systems, so essentially as modules that you enable as plugins. And so you can see that there's a bunch of different systems like cooking system in inventory and that kind of thing that I've created for the game. And so the focus for this week's work was working on this cooking station as a way of learning about the game playability system. So this game playability system is an Epic design thing. And you implement this game playability system component through the interface here. And the idea is that it kind of structures your gameplay code a bit more. But I've found that it's like implementing this particular thing. I use interfaces quite a lot. So this is my interactable interface that I created for my interaction system. But the ability system itself is just really overkill for what is essentially just like a cooker with some controls on the front and that kind of thing. So the ability system is probably going to be more based around sort of the character side of things. So like what you can do as a player, all of the different types of activities you can be involved in. So let's move on to something a bit more visually interesting, and I'll show you some of the content that I've bought. So the point of all these sort of plugins, these modular parts, like the inventory, like the interaction system, like say the one I'm working on now, the cooking system. Previously ones I've done building and, being able to place things, so furnishing. The point is that all of these systems are kind of part of what makes the game interactive. But of course, there's more than that to do, right? I'm thinking of quite a complicated game. So the reason why I was looking at the game playability system is like, how do I integrate all of these different types of systems? So I've still got farming and trading and crafting are kind of tied to inventory quite a lot. Salvaging is a way of getting more inventory, as is mining. So the point is to sort of have pipelines of interesting stuff to do and to have them systemically play with each other. So that's what I'm kind of aiming for the game, is to have a systemic update. So before we have a look at some of these systems in action, I just thought it'd be worth sort of pointing out that because I'm a programmer and not an artist, I rely heavily on essentially buying in packs of art. And I've been doing that quite a lot recently. Sorry, my voice is going a little bit right now. I've been buying a lot of asset packs. In fact, I've got asset to, tens of thousands probably of art assets. So a big part of the sort of tool set that I'm building myself is being able to manipulate those assets in a way that's kind of effective as a solo developer. So building the sort of systems that allow me to make an interesting game. And the game itself will be largely based around these sort of systemic design kind of things. So I'm not, I'm going to hopefully rely on systems of systems to make the game interesting. So things like procedurally generated content, but also planning out specific interactions and those kind of things to make the game world feel believable, but also to sort of keep it fresh and vibrant and sort of alive, that kind of thing. So I think we probably should have a look at the inventory system and the editor that I built for that, just to sort of give you a flavour of what that kind of thing might look like. So what you see in here is the item editor. And the idea is that each inventory obviously contains a count of items, right? So you want a central database for these things. And the interesting thing about the item editor is that you can do things like filter by categories. So each item has a tag or a set of tags, and you can do, local searches on particular names and that kind of thing. This is a pattern I've used quite a lot in different sort of game systems, so I'm quite used to it. But the thing to sort of recognize here is that the Unreal Engine is actually really good at allowing you to extend it. So creating a little editor like this, it might seem like a sort of minor thing, but just the fact that the tool set makes it so simple and easy to do is actually really important. And I'm not, I'm not saying that it's the perfect sort of setup, and obviously some of the user interface is less than ideal, but the point is that it works enough. And I think, the great is the enemy of the good in a way, right? Because I'm not expecting everything to be perfect. It just has to be good enough for me to use it to make the game. So that's kind of what I'm aiming for. And the item editor is just one of a set of different editors that I'll have for all of the data-driven sort of decision stuff in the game. So, right, things like inventories will be stored as data, recipes, crafting recipes, cooking recipes, any sort of things where there's going to be some data that needs to be processed obviously needs tool sets to be able to make it sort of work for me as easy as possible. And that goes doubly for things like procedural systems and stuff. So we'll look at some of the procedural stuff in a few videos time. But there's the inventory. I think it's now sort of have a bit of a fun look at some of the cooking station stuff. So what you see in here is the sort of setup. I've just selected the cooker in the editor just to show you. You see these little sort of red, green, blue arrow things. Those are the points where you can interact with the object, right? So part of the problem is that the sort of ability system has so many different parts of like data manipulation where you can switch things on and off and manipulate them in terms of like, whether they're allowed or not. You can see here that like there's tons and tons of little data items to set up. So one of the downsides of having lots of content in the game is going to be that every single one of these things has to have some setup. But obviously this was an experiment that was probably a little bit overkill. So let's just sort of run the game. Sorry about the debug lines. They're just showing the interaction distances and stuff. And actually, it's probably a lot easier to see things if I go first person. And you won't have the head disappearing eventually. We'll fix that. So you can switch the things on with the usual interaction. The E keys, the interact key for the normal sort of setup. Obviously, you'll be able to set that. And just switching on and off different parts of the cooker. And the idea is that this cooking station system allows you to set up all types of different cooking operations. So it's not just a stove, right? It could be a grill or whatever types of things you need to do cooking operations on. So you can see here, I've got a sort of snapping mechanism. Now the snapping mechanism, as you'll see shortly, is not the ideal one. So I'm definitely going to have to fix some of that up as well. But you can see that there's a way of interacting with things that I can least test out and might be in the first prototype, demo for people to try out. So I think it's a reasonable first pass at having a system for doing that. I will obviously have a bunch of other types of cooking process, and I'll actually have food ingredients and pots that know they're being cooked, for instance, which would be a good thing for a cooking system, wouldn't it? But But, you know, like it's an early prototype. I think all of these systems right now are just going to be early prototypes until I'm satisfied that they're at least play testable. Because my intention is to play test a lot of this game very early, even in its incredibly rough state. But before we get to that, I've got to figure out a way of doing maps, and that's what I want to sort of discuss next is like for the final part of this video is just what my plan is for making the amount of content I've got available as a playable thing. And it goes back to sort of Arc Raiders, but also some other games that I really like. So I've been playing quite a lot of Arc Raiders, as I mentioned previously. And one of the things that it struck me as I was playing was this like overworld map, right? You can see here, there's set points on the map, and the map itself, you know, like you're essentially choosing a level to load, right? These are separate levels that are loaded in Unreal Engine, and you can edit them and, you know, make them interesting and visually appealing and that kind of stuff. But they're essentially a sort of fixed element. And then it reminded me of a game called Mountain Blade, which I played quite a lot of. I really liked it. It was a very unique indie game. And Mountain Blade, for all its intents and purposes, has the same kind of overworld map. But what's the difference is that the Mountain Blade version of it has sort of, not random, but sort of semi-random encounters, right? You can encounter things on the overworld map because it's an interactive map. It's not a sort of UI overlay, right? It's a thing that you can control a character going across a map. So my intention for the game is to sort of mix the two things together, right? So you will have set points on the map that you can go and visit, and they will load in as unique levels. And then when you leave them, you go back to the overworld. And so what ends up is that the game has like different layers, right? So you'll have the underground, the bunker layer where you live, and then you'll have the sort of concrete hull, I haven't quite figured out what the name of it is, for like just above your bunker. So like the sort of bunker surrounding area. And then you'll have an overworld map that you can go and visit that allows you to travel across the world, right, and go and see unique places. And each one of these unique places will have a representation. And as you visit them, they will load in a new level. And when you leave them, they get rid of that level and go back to the overworld. And so the aesthetic is going to be very much this sort of Arc Raiders thing, because this is all built in the tool set called Houdini, right, which is this procedural generation geometry sort of content generation engine that I'm using. And so the plan is to have the best of both systems, really. Like the Houdini, really nice aesthetic, you know, the quality of the Houdini's sort of production quality and the level of that, but with the more dynamic world of like the Mountain Blade thing. So it's not just choosing static levels, it's also having procedurally generated encounters. And I want to do that because I think that like having some really well polished levels is a really good thing, right? You know, hand designed content for a lot of it, and using asset packs that I've already sort of shown you. And then some of it is going to be procedurally generated, so you get a bit more of a dynamism to the world, and that's what I want to go for, really. So a good crossover between the sort of Mountain Blade dynamism of their overworld map. It changes your viewpoint, and it's an interesting thing, but it actually works really well. Like the Mountain Blade experience works really well, even though it looks a little bit funky. So I think we can update the visuals, but still have that Mountain Blade sort of feel. If you haven't played the game, by the way, I do really recommend it. It's got a very unique sort of vibe, you know, it's a very indie kind of game. And I really like it. So I thought I'd just cover that because it's been sort of nagging me how I would control the scope of the level structures and level designs and sort of asset handling and stuff. So that's my plan.